Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are going to look at Learning Target 7C, and we're going to start with the first part, which is all about simple interest. Alright, so first we need to know, what is interest? Basically, interest is money that is paid at a regular rate based on money that's either borrowed or money that is lent. Okay, and so when we think about maybe going to the bank, right, you can earn interest if you open, say, a savings account or a money market account, which is kind of like a savings account but usually earns a little bit more interest. And then there's also something called certificates of deposit, or CDs, and those can also earn you some basic interest. So essentially, by taking your money and putting it in the bank, right, you're giving the bank a loan, and so the bank is going to pay you back for that by letting you have interest. Okay, but sometimes you are the one who has to pay interest. So for example, if you buy a car and take out a car loan, then not only do you have to pay back the money that you borrowed, but you also have to pay interest on that loan. Or if you buy a home and you have a mortgage, that's another time when you might have to pay interest. Or if you take out student loans to pay for college or some sort of schooling or technical training, again, that would have interest associated with it. So interest sometimes is an amount of money that you're going to have to pay, and other times it's money that you get to earn, depending on whether you're the one loaning the money to the bank or the one borrowing the money from the bank. Okay, so when we talk about simple interest, it's a very simple equation that we're going to be using, and it looks like I is equal to P times R times T. Now, each of those letters obviously stands for something, so as we talk through this equation, feel free to write down what each letter stands for so that you have it all in your notes. Okay, so I stands for interest. Okay, so that's how much interest you're going to earn, and that comes from multiplying together the principal, the rate, and the time. Now when we say principal, that means the amount of money that you either borrow or deposit, so like your starting amount. So if I open a savings account and I deposit $2,000, that's my principal amount. Okay, the rate, that's your interest rate. It's always going to be a percentage. So interest is always calculated, as being 2% of the amount of money in the account, or 1%, or whatever that happens to be. But when we use that percentage in the equation, you're going to have to rewrite it as a decimal. So that's an important thing to remember, is that we always rewrite the interest rate from a percent into decimal form. Okay, and finally, T stands for time, and in this case we're going to use time in terms of years. So if you have a amount of time given to in months, you're going to have to do some converting so that you have it written in terms of years. Okay, so if you have not yet written all of this down, please pause the video here so that you can do so, and then hit play when you're ready. Alright, so let's try a few examples. And again, you can write these down as we go, and then stop and pause as necessary if you need more time to write things down. Okay, so let's say we started with a principal amount of $300. So let's say you put $300 into a basic savings account, and you're going to earn 4% annual interest. Okay, so that's your rate, is that 4%. And you leave the money in there for 5 years. Well, how much interest will you have earned during that time? Okay, so if we start with our equation, I equals P times R times T, we're going to be plugging in all of those parts. So for the principal, I'm plugging in $300. For my rate, I'm plugging in 4%. But again, think about how we would write that. We have to change that to a decimal. So remember, to go from a percent to a decimal, I'm going to divide by 100, which means that would be 0.04. And then for time, it's already in terms of years, so I can plug that in as being 5. So I've got 300 times 0.04 times 5. Okay, so then on my calculator, I'm going to type all of that in, multiply all three numbers together, and we get I is equal to 60. So that means at the end of those 5 years, you've earned an extra $60 in interest. So not only do you have the $300 you started with, you have an extra $60. So altogether, you now have $360 just for letting that money sort of sit in that account. All right, so again, if you need to pause to write anything down, please do so, and then hit continue. All right, next example. All right, let's start with a principal amount of $450, an annual interest rate of 6%, and our time is going to be 30 months. Okay, so thinking about our equation and what we're plugging in. For P, I'm going to be plugging in 450. For the rate, okay, again, take our percent, 6%. I'm going to divide that by 100 to rewrite it as 0.06. And then time, I have it as 30 months. So I need you to think about, how do you change that over to number of years? Think for a minute. What does that look like? Okay, hopefully you're thinking if there's 12 months per year, then that's going to be 2 full years plus an extra 6 months, which is half a year. So we're actually going to plug that in as 2.5 years, or 2.5. So I've got the 450, the 0.06, which is my percent rewritten as a decimal, and my time in terms of years. Okay, multiply all of that together, and I'm going to get 67.5, which means I've earned $67.50 in interest. And again, that's on top of the $450 that we started with. All right, so this time we're going to look for an unknown value. So let's say I know that I earned $99.45 in interest, and my principal amount, so my starting amount, was $1,560. If I only left that money in that account for 9 months, what would be my annual interest rate? What would it have been? Okay, so we're still going to start with our same equation, I equals PRT, and we're going to think about what do we plug into each part. For interest, for I, I'm plugging in the $99.45. For P, principal, that's $1,560. The rate is my unknown, so that stays as a variable. Time, 9 months, again, we got to think about what that would convert to. 9 months out of 12 months in a year, that's going to reduce to 3/4, or 0.75. So as I plug all of these things in, I got to think about, how am I going to figure out that missing variable? So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to multiply these two numbers that are on the same side together. So this 1,560 times 0.75. That gives me 1,170. So the $99.45 comes from 1170 times R. So to get R by itself, I now need to undo this multiplication, which means I'm going to divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by 1170. It's going to cancel out here, and that's going to leave me with 0.085 for the rate. Now remember that this is now written as a decimal, so I need to turn this back into a percent. So to go from a decimal to a percent, I'm going to multiply by 100. That'll move the decimal over twice and give me a rate of 8.5%. And again, feel free to write this one down, so pause if you need to, and then hit play to continue. Okay, one more example. This time we're going to find the starting amount, or the principal. So I've earned $1,530 in interest. I don't know how much money was in the account to begin with, but I earned 9% interest for 10 years. Okay, so plugging in, I'm going to plug in the 1,530 for I. P stays as my variable because that's the part I don't know. 9% gets plugged in as 0.09, and time is 10 years. So again, to solve for P, I'm going to start by multiplying the two numbers that I do know on the same side together. And now I'm going to undo this multiplication by dividing both sides by 0.9. That's going to get me P by itself, and that's going to give me $1,700 for P. So the principal starting amount was $1,700. Okay, so again, at this point, make sure you've got your examples written down. Pause again if you need to, and then you can move forward. All right, so this last one, we're going to have you guys try this on your own. So if you have a principal amount of $2,500 and an annual interest rate of 2%, and you leave that money in an account for 4.5 years, I want you to calculate how much simple interest you will have earned. So make sure that you work it out. Careful on your interest rate. Make sure you think about how we use that 2%, okay? And then bring that answer back with you to class. All right, and finally, before you go, please write down one thing that you either learned or were reminded of, and then any questions that you have. So connections you made, if you have questions about how something works. Again, please write at least one thing for each prompt. All right, thanks for watching, guys.